Hello everyone, this is Bobbin Threadbare and welcome back to Threadbare Reviews. For today's video, patron A Great Divorce has asked me to look at a short story titled The Game of Rat and Dragon by Cordwainer Smith. The story originally came out in 1955. About the author. Cordwainer Smith is the nom de plume of a man whose given name was Paul Myron Anthony Linebarger. Or at least Cordwainer is one of his pseudonyms. Depending on the genre he was writing in, he would use other names like Carmichael Smith, Felix C. Forst, and Anthony Bearden. The reason for all these fake names is not that Linebarger was a particularly private person, but he was born in 1913 and it was a relatively common belief at the time that someone with a serious profession shouldn't be caught writing anything as frivolous as fiction or poetry. And to be fair to Linebarger, he had a very serious career outside of literature. His family was apparently very closely connected to the Chinese nationalist movement and men like Sun Yat-sen and Chiang Kai-shek. Before World War II, Linebarger was a professor at Duke University who specialized in Far East affairs. During the war, he helped coordinate the Allies' efforts with nationalist China and rose to the rank of colonel. And after the war, he moved to Johns Hopkins University and taught CIA agents how to use psychological warfare. Just about the only thing he didn't do was get involved in the Vietnam War, although that's partly because he died of a heart attack in 1966. He was only 53 at the time. As you might imagine from someone so busy, Linebarger's output as Cordwainer was fairly short and sporadic, but he was fairly consistent in his writing from 1955 to his death in 1966. Most of his science fiction works take place in the same setting, which is named The Instrumentality of Mankind, after the ruling government. The stories take place thousands of years in the future, and in this future, humanity stagnates as robots have taken over simple jobs, humanoids genetically engineered from domesticated animals have taken over complex jobs but are treated as slaves, and humans themselves are genetically altered from birth to specialize in highly skilled professions. Fortunately, humanity eventually rediscovers the dynamic culture it had lost over the millennia and frees the so-called underpeople of their slavery. Something else that's interesting about Cordwainer's fiction is the way it introduces story elements and language fragments from outside of the Anglosphere. Linebarger knew at least 6 languages and had extensive experience with the peoples and cultures of East Asia, and so it should be no surprise that Chinese stories were a significant source of inspiration for him. He was particularly fond of using non-English numbers to create character names. Anyway, today's story, The Game of Rat and Dragon, is a part of the instrumentality setting, but seems to take place relatively early on. It's also focused in on one specific aspect of the setting, so if you want to know more about the rest of the setting, you should check out some other Cordwainer Smith works, many of which are available for free online. The review. The Game of Rat and Dragon isn't about a character arc so much as it describes a piece of the future history that Cordwainer created. The basic idea is that faster-than-light travel is possible through a process called pinlighting or planoforming. While ships can travel between stars by moving through higher dimensions, there are creatures between the stars that can destroy the minds of anyone who strays too far into the darkness. Telepathic humans can destroy these creatures, these dragons, using intense light bombs, the pinlights, but only if they can react before the dragons spot them and destroy the ship's crew. Unfortunately, human reaction times are not fast enough to consistently beat the dragons, but humans aren't the only animals on Earth, and so pinlighters were eventually paired with cats, who, as ambush hunters, are able to react aggressively much faster than a human, and as a domesticated animal, they work well with humans. The cats are genetically modified to be telepathic, but at least at this point in the instrumentality future, that's the only thing that's different about them. The cats also see the dimensional monsters as rats, hence the title of the story. The plot of the story, such as it is, describes a day in the life of a few pinlighters during a jump, and how they get along with each other, with the rest of the ship's crew members, and with the cats, which they call partners. This story is a classic example of Golden Age science fiction, in that it cares more about the setting than it does about the characters. The purpose of the story is to share an idea about the possible future, and the fact that there are people with names and personalities running around is really just for the sake of adding a little spice. Rendezvous with Rama is also like that. The nature of Rama and the political events surrounding its arrival are much more important to the novel than any of the individual characters. Still, while the characters may be secondary to the setting, they display a lot of individual personality in this 11-page story. Woodley is an old veteran who stays sane by avoiding thinking about his job. Underhill is a newbie who's still amazed by his day job, but runs the risk of burnout because of the high-stress nature of pinlighting. Father Moontree is an older recruit whose talent was discovered unusually late in life, and West is a young girl who, despite appearances, can hold her own in the battle between humans and dragons. Each of the cats also has its own personality, and the story spends more time describing what they're like than it spends describing the humans. As an introduction to the instrumentality of mankind setting, I'd say that the game of Rat and Dragon definitely has me interested. And since a lot of the stories are public domain, it doesn't sound like I'll have to spend much money to read more. So go ahead and have a read if you're interested, and the best place to look online is Project Gutenberg. The analysis. The idea that there is something hostile to human life out there between the stars is not a new concept. Just about half of my reviews in this series involve cosmic horror in one aspect or another, and Lovecraft, for one, has been writing stories along those lines since the 1910s. What's interesting about the game of Rat and Dragon is that it has the elements of a cosmic horror story, but it itself is not horror. The dragons, or rats in the depths of space, are hostile, deadly, and they hate light, but when the story takes place, they are not horrifying. Humans have figured out how to keep themselves safe from the dragons, and so at this point, they're just an obstacle that makes spaceflight a little risky and a little more expensive. With that in mind, you can consider this story to be an allegory for technological development. Back in the Stone Age, just about everything around you was cosmic horror. An unknown quantity that doesn't care what you think and can kill you with just an accidental wave of its hand. Even your own body could turn against you and kill you in an instant, and the people around you could only guess why you died. But as time went on, as technology and science started to make sense of the world, the unknowns started to shrink, to vanish. We identified diseases, their causes, and their treatments. We studied weather patterns and figured out why the wind blows and how to predict storms. We identified the animals around us and studied their biology and behavior. In short, a lot of what used to be unknown is now known to us, and as a result of that, the sources of cosmic horror are much rarer than they used to be. And so that's what's happened here. The dragons, a cosmic horror if I've ever heard one, used to be these scary things that could instantly destroy a ship that dared to move beyond the safety of a star, but humans have figured out how they work and how to destroy them regularly. Dealing with them is still dangerous, and pinlighters are both respected and well paid, but it's a routine sort of danger. And the pinlighters are less like wizards meddling with dark powers, and more like firefighters or lifeguards. They risk their lives regularly, but they're well trained and well equipped to deal with the hazards. It's not a horror story anymore. It's just a game. So with that in mind, I suppose it's time to bring back the recurring theme of this series and put yet another new spin on it. So, how about this? Don't fear the unknown, or at least don't fear it forever, because one day, even the greatest of dangers will be understood and overcome. Thanks for joining me again for today's Threadbare review, and I hope I'll see you next time. Until then, please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and if you have a little extra money to spare, you can support me on Patreon. Link in the description.